My father pointed at the front door while my 8-year-old son held my hand. "If you're not going to start paying rent," he said, "both of you can leave tonight." I looked at the keys in his hand, then at the folder still sitting in my car. He had no idea the house he was throwing us out of legally belonged to me. My name is Naledi Makona. I'm 34 years old, a widowed pharmacist, and the mother of an 8-year-old boy named Neo. 2 years earlier, after my parents retired, I quietly stepped in to help them keep the family home when financial problems threatened to take it away. I never imagined that my kindness would eventually be used against my own son. After my husband passed away, my whole world changed overnight. Every day felt heavy, but I had to stay strong for my 8-year-old son, Neo. We needed a safe place while I worked hard to rebuild our lives, so my parents asked us to stay with them for a while. I believed being together as a family would help us heal, especially with Christmas coming. I thought this holiday would bring love, comfort, and happy memories after everything we had lost. But I had no idea it would become one of the most painful times of my life. Even though we lived in my parents' house, I never expected them to take care of us for free. Every month, I quietly paid for groceries, electricity, water, school costs, and repairs around the house. If something broke, I fixed it. If bills needed to be paid, I helped without complaining. I never kept count because they were my parents, and I believed family should help one another. I didn't need praise or thanks. I only wanted peace for my son. But no matter how much I did, it was never enough for my parents. They hardly noticed my efforts. Instead, they always praised my younger brother, Kwame. He had not worked for almost a year, yet my parents treated him like he could do nothing wrong. They defended every mistake he made and spoke proudly about his future, while everything I did was ignored. It felt like I had become invisible inside the very home I was helping to support. On Christmas evening, the whole family gathered around the dinner table. I hoped we could enjoy one peaceful meal together. Instead, a small disagreement quickly turned into a painful argument. My father suddenly hit his hand hard on the table. Everyone became silent. Then he looked straight at me and said, "You and Neo have become freeloaders. You keep living here because of my generosity." His words cut through my heart. I could not believe what I was hearing after everything I had done for this family. The room stayed silent. Then Neo gently held my hand, looked up at me with tears in his eyes, and softly whispered, "Mom, are we really not wanted here?" The next morning, I woke up hoping the hurtful words from the night before were only spoken in anger. I told myself that maybe my father would calm down and everything would return to normal. I wanted to believe Christmas had simply brought out strong emotions. I made breakfast for Neo, helped him get ready for the day, and tried to hide the sadness on my face. I did not want my son to carry the pain that adults had created. Just as I was cleaning the kitchen, my mother walked toward me holding a folded piece of paper. Her face was serious. She quietly placed the paper into my hands and said, "These are the new house rules." There was no smile. There was no kindness in her voice. I looked at her for a moment, then slowly opened the paper. It listed several simple rules about cleaning, visitors, and keeping the house organized. None of them surprised me because I already respected their home. But when my eyes reached the last line, my heart became heavy. It said, "Either start paying rent next month or move out." For a few seconds, I simply stared at those words. I read them again, hoping I had misunderstood. My own parents believed I had been living in their house without helping. They truly thought Neo and I were a burden to them. The pain was not because they asked for money. The pain came from knowing they had completely ignored everything I had already done for them. The truth was very different from what they believed. Every single month, I had been paying much more than any rent they could have asked for. I helped protect their future in ways they did not even realize. I had quietly carried responsibilities that no one else in the family knew about. But the money was never handed directly to my parents, so they believed I was giving them nothing at all. I could have answered immediately. I could have told them the truth right there in the kitchen. I could have ended every false accusation with only a few words. Instead, I slowly folded the paper, looked at my mother, gave a small calm smile, and softly said, "I'll think about it." She nodded without saying anything and walked away. My parents looked satisfied, believing I had finally accepted their demands. They thought my silence meant defeat. They believed I had no choice except to obey them. They had no idea that my calmness was not surrender. It was patience. And very soon, The truth they had ignored for so long would change everything they believed about that house and about me. That afternoon, after leaving my parents' house, I drove across town with many thoughts filling my mind. My mother's letter was still in my handbag, and my father's harsh words kept repeating in my head. I knew I could not keep pretending that everything was fine. It was finally time to visit the one person who knew the complete truth. There was someone who had been there from the very beginning, someone who had helped me make one of the biggest decisions of my life. That person was the attorney who had handled everything 18 months earlier. When I walked into his office, he greeted me warmly and invited me to sit down. He remembered me immediately because my case had been very important. After a few moments, he opened a large file from his cabinet and placed it carefully on his desk. Before showing me anything, he looked at me with a serious expression and asked, "Has your family finally been told?" His question made me lower my eyes. I slowly shook my head. "No," I answered quietly. For a moment, he simply stared at me. He looked surprised that so much time had passed without anyone knowing the truth. Then he gently leaned back in his chair and said, "Naledi, you've protected this secret long enough." His words stayed in my heart. Many people would have thought I was hiding money or trying to surprise my family with my success. But that was never the reason. I was not hiding wealth. I was keeping a promise that I had made long ago. I had given my word, and I believed that keeping my promise was more important than proving myself right. The attorney understood why I had stayed silent, but he also knew that my silence had allowed my family to believe something that was not true. They had judged me without knowing the facts. They had called me and my son freeloaders while I carried a burden that none of them could see. Without saying another word, the attorney slowly turned the file toward me. Inside were neatly arranged papers, official letters, legal forms, and signed documents. Every page told part of the same story. Every signature, every date, and every record proved exactly what had happened 18 months earlier. As I looked at those papers, I realized that everything my parents believed about their home was built on a secret they had never been told. Those documents held the answer to one question that had remained hidden for so long. They explained exactly why my parents had never lost the house. The attorney slowly placed the documents in front of me and pointed to the first page. As I looked at the dates and signatures, memories from 18 months earlier came rushing back. That was the time when my father had just retired. His monthly income had become much smaller, but the mortgage on the family home was still waiting to be paid every month. At first, he tried to manage it on his own. He used his savings and hoped things would somehow get better. But the payments became too much, and before long, he could no longer keep up. The bank sent several warning letters asking for the overdue payments. My father hid those letters from the rest of the family because he did not want anyone to know how serious the situation had become. He was proud and believed he could fix everything by himself. But the missed payments continued to grow, and finally the bank started the legal process to take back the house. The home where our family had shared birthdays, holidays, and so many memories was about to be lost. One evening, my father called me and asked if we could meet privately. I still remember the sadness in his eyes that day. It was the first time I had ever seen him admit that he needed help. He quietly told me everything. He said he was afraid of losing the house and even more afraid that our relatives would find out. He felt ashamed that after working his whole life, he could no longer keep the family home. I could not watch my parents lose everything they had built. So I spoke with the bank, met with the attorney, and followed every legal step. The bank arranged a legal sale, and I bought the property myself. It was the only way to stop the foreclosure and make sure my parents could continue living there without being forced out. I never saw it as buying a house. I saw it as protecting my family. After everything was completed, my father held my hand and asked me for one more favor. He begged me not to tell anyone that I now legally owned the house. He said he needed time before sharing the truth because he could not bear the embarrassment. I agreed because I loved him and wanted to protect his dignity. He promised me that when the right time came, he would tell the whole family himself. But that day never came. Months passed, then more. Then a year. My father stayed silent. Instead of telling the truth, he allowed everyone to believe the house still belonged to him. And, because no one knew what had really happened, they looked at me and my son as if we were living there only because of his kindness. A few days after my meeting with the attorney, life at home continued as if nothing had happened. My parents acted like everything was normal and no one spoke about the argument at Christmas. I stayed quiet because I was still hoping my father would finally keep the promise he had made to me. I believed he would gather the family together and explain the truth himself. But instead of honesty, something happened that made the situation even more painful. One Saturday afternoon, my younger brother, Kwame, called everyone into the living room. He looked excited and full of confidence. He spread several papers across the coffee table and proudly said he had been making plans for the future. My parents smiled at him with pride before he had even explained anything. Kwame pointed at drawings of the house and began talking about changing almost every room. He wanted to make the kitchen bigger, remove one of the walls, build a new bedroom upstairs, and turn the old study into a large entertainment room. He spoke as if every decision had already been approved. Then he smiled and said, "I'm only improving my future inheritance. One day this house will belong to me anyway, so it's better to start planning now." His words filled the room with excitement. My parents nodded as if everything he said made perfect sense. They even began sharing their own ideas about the renovations. They talked about paint colors, new furniture, and expensive flooring. No one asked whether these changes were even possible. No one thought about who actually had the legal right to make those decisions. The next week became even more surprising. Without speaking to me, Kwame invited 2 building contractors to the house. They walked from room to room, measuring walls and discussing how much work would be needed. One contractor even suggested knocking down a large wall to create an open living space. Kwame happily agreed and started asking about prices. I stood nearby, quietly watching everything. I said nothing. As I listened to their conversation, I suddenly understood something important. Kwame was not trying to steal anything from me. He truly believed this house would one day become his. He believed every word because that was the story he had been told for years. The person who had created that misunderstanding was not Kwame. My father knew exactly who legally owned the house. He knew why the bank had never taken it away. He knew why our family still had a roof over their heads. Yet he stayed silent and allowed everyone, including Kwame, to believe a future that did not exist. Watching them plan renovations for a house they did not legally own, I realized the truth could not stay hidden much longer. Very soon, someone would have to explain everything. A few days later, something completely unexpected happened. No one planned it, and no one saw it coming. It started with something very ordinary. My mother was cleaning the house and looking through an old cabinet because she wanted to find some insurance papers. She pulled out several old files, family photos, and unopened envelopes that had been forgotten for months. Dust covered many of them, and she carefully placed everything on the dining table to sort through it. As she continued searching, one envelope caught her attention. It was larger than the others and had the name of a law office printed on the front. It was addressed to both of my parents. The envelope had never been opened. My mother frowned as she looked at it, trying to remember when it had arrived. Then she quietly said that it must have been delivered months earlier and accidentally placed inside the cabinet during the small renovation work around the house. After that, everyone had simply forgotten about it. She slowly opened the envelope and pulled out the papers inside. At first, she expected them to be some kind of routine legal notice or advertisement. But as she started reading, the expression on her face changed. She read every line again, more slowly this time, as if she could not believe what the letter was saying. The letter was polite and professional. It reminded my parents to contact the law office to arrange a meeting about updating their occupancy agreement. It also explained that keeping the agreement current would help avoid future misunderstandings. There were no threats or warnings. It was simply asking them to schedule an appointment. My mother looked confused. She turned the pages over, searching for another explanation, but there was nothing else. She quietly whispered to herself, "Occupancy agreement? What does that mean?" She believed the house already belonged to her and my father. In her mind, there was no reason for lawyers to write about an occupancy agreement. Owners did not usually receive letters like this. The more she thought about it, the less sense it made. When my father came into the room, she immediately handed him the letter. "Have you seen this before?" she asked. For a brief moment, I noticed something I had not seen on my father's face before. His confidence disappeared. He stared at the letter without saying a word. His hands became still, and the color slowly faded from his face. My mother looked at him, waiting for an answer. Instead of explaining, he remained silent. That silence made her even more worried. She began asking more questions, but he avoided looking into her eyes. At that moment, I realized the truth was finally beginning to find its own way out. The secret that had stayed hidden for so long could no longer remain buried, and very soon every question would demand an honest answer. A few days after my mother found the letter, the attorney arranged a meeting for all of us. My parents agreed to come, and Kwame came with them because he wanted to understand what was happening. I also arrived early and quietly waited in the meeting room. My heart was beating fast, but I was not there to argue with anyone. I only wanted the truth to be heard. After so many months of silence, there was no reason to hide anything anymore. When everyone sat down, the room became very quiet. No one was shouting. No one was blaming anyone. My mother looked nervous, Kwame looked confused, and my father kept his eyes on the table. The attorney greeted everyone kindly and explained that the purpose of the meeting was simply to clear up a misunderstanding that had continued for far too long. He opened a large file and placed several documents on the table. One by one, he carefully explained every step. He started with the bank records, showing the missed mortgage payments after my father's retirement. Then he showed the official notices from the bank explaining that the house had entered the legal foreclosure process. My mother looked shocked because she had never seen those papers before. Next, the attorney placed another document in front of everyone. It was the legal purchase agreement. He calmly explained that when the bank prepared to take the house, I had stepped forward and legally purchased the property through the bank's approved process. Every signature, every date, and every page matched the official records. There was nothing hidden and nothing illegal. Everything had been done properly. Then he showed the registered property deed. He gently turned it toward my parents and Kwame so they could read it themselves. My name was clearly written as the legal owner of the house. The room became completely silent. Kwame looked at the deed again and again because he could not believe what he was seeing. My mother covered her mouth with her hand as tears slowly filled her eyes. She finally understood why the lawyer had written about an occupancy agreement. Then the attorney looked directly at my father and spoke in a calm voice. Mrs. Nalady has never charged either of you rent because she personally requested a lifetime occupancy agreement. She wanted both of you to live in this home for the rest of your lives without fear of being forced to leave. No one spoke. Those words changed everything. My father slowly lowered his head. He could not look at me. He knew I had protected him from losing his home. He knew I had kept his secret because I respected him. Yet he had allowed me and my son to be called freeloaders in the very house I had saved. At that moment, the truth became impossible for anyone in the room to deny. After the meeting ended, everyone walked out quietly. No one argued. No one tried to explain away what had happened. The truth had been placed on the table for everyone to see, and there was nothing left to hide. My parents slowly walked to their car without saying much to each other. Kwame stood beside them, still trying to understand everything he had just learned. I gently took Neo's hand, smiled at him, and we walked to our car together. The drive home was unusually quiet. The roads were busy, but inside the car there was only silence. Neo looked out of the window, watching the houses and people passing by. I could tell he was thinking about everything he had heard in the attorney's office. He was only 8 years old, but children often understand much more than adults realize. I wanted to protect him from all the pain, but I also knew he deserved honest answers. After several minutes, Neo turned toward me. His voice was soft and innocent. "Mom," he said, "if it's your house, why did Grandpa say we didn't belong?" His simple question broke my heart. For a moment, I could not answer. I kept my eyes on the road while trying to find the right words. The attorney had explained the law. The documents had proved the truth. The registered deed showed who owned the house. But none of those papers could explain why someone would hurt the people who had helped them the most. No legal document could answer my son's question. I reached over and gently held his small hand. Then I quietly said, "Sometimes people forget who stood beside them when life became difficult." Neo looked at me carefully, trying to understand. "Did Grandpa forget what you did?" he asked. I smiled sadly and nodded a little. "Sometimes good people make painful mistakes," I replied. "When people feel ashamed or afraid, they may stop seeing the kindness that is right in front of them. That doesn't make kindness worthless. It only means we must never stop doing what is right." Neo stayed quiet for a moment. Then he asked, "Are you angry with Grandpa?" I thought about everything that had happened. I remembered the hurtful words, the unfair accusations, and the long secret I had carried alone. But I also remembered my father's fear when he thought he would lose the family home. I was hurt, I answered honestly. Very hurt. But carrying anger forever only makes the pain heavier. We can remember what happened without letting it change who we are. Neo slowly smiled and squeezed my hand. At that moment, I realized the story had become much bigger than a house or legal papers. My son had learned something that many adults never learn. Your worth is not decided by someone else's words. Even when people fail to appreciate your kindness, you should never forget the value of your own heart. That lesson stayed with both of us long after we arrived home. A few days passed after the meeting with the attorney. I went back to my normal routine at the pharmacy, helping customers, filling prescriptions, and trying to focus on my work. Life outside looked the same, but inside my heart, many emotions were still fighting with each other. I was no longer carrying the secret alone, yet the pain from my parents' words had not disappeared. Every time I remembered my father calling me and Neo freeloaders, it still hurt. One quiet afternoon, the receptionist walked over to me and softly said, "Nality, your parents are here. They want to see you." For a moment, I stopped what I was doing. I wondered why they had come. Part of me expected another argument. I thought they might try to explain their actions or question the attorney's documents. I took a deep breath before walking into the small meeting room. When I opened the door, I immediately noticed something was different. My father was not standing proudly with his arms crossed. My mother was not trying to avoid my eyes. They both looked tired and deeply ashamed. Neither of them spoke at first. My father slowly stood up and looked at me. His eyes were full of regret. "Nality," he said quietly, "we didn't come here to argue." My mother gently nodded. "We're not here to defend ourselves either." For a few seconds, the room became completely silent. Then my father took a deep breath and said the words I never thought I would hear. "We came to apologize." His voice shook as he continued speaking. "I let my pride become more important than my gratitude. You saved our home, but instead of thanking you, I allowed everyone to believe it was still mine. I was too embarrassed to tell the truth, and that silence hurt you more than I ever imagined." Tears slowly filled my mother's eyes. She looked at me and quietly said, "I also failed you." I noticed things were becoming unfair, but I stayed silent because I was afraid of upsetting your father. I convinced myself that keeping peace was the right choice. Now I understand that my silence only made the situation worse. Listening to them was not easy. Their words could not erase the pain that Neo and I had carried. They could not remove the memory of being told we did not belong. Some wounds need time to heal. But for the first time in many years, my parents were not making excuses. They were not blaming stress, money, or misunderstandings. They accepted responsibility for their choices. They admitted they had been wrong without asking anyone else to carry the blame. As I looked at them, I realized something important. A sincere apology cannot change the past, but it can become the first honest step toward building a better future. After my parents apologized, many people who heard the story expected only one ending. Some relatives quietly called me and said that now it was my turn to make my parents feel the same pain they had caused me. Others believed I should ask them to leave the house immediately because it legally belonged to me. They said I finally had the power to teach everyone a lesson they would never forget. But I never wanted revenge. I did not save my parents' home so that one day I could throw them out of it. I had bought the house because I loved my family, not because I wanted control over them. The truth had already come out. They knew what I had done. They knew how deeply they had hurt me and my son. I did not believe causing them more pain would heal our family. Instead, I met with the attorney one more time. This time, everyone came together willingly. There were no secrets left between us. We carefully discussed how to avoid any future misunderstandings. The attorney prepared a clear family occupancy agreement that explained everything in simple language. It stated that my parents could continue living in the house for the rest of their lives without worrying about being forced to leave. It also clearly showed that I remained the legal owner of the property. Everyone read every page before signing it. For the first time, every member of the family understood the truth. Kwame also surprised me. After learning everything, he admitted that he had believed the house would one day become his because that was what he had always assumed. He apologized for making plans without asking anyone. Instead of depending on an inheritance that was never his, he decided to change his own life. He found a job, rented a small apartment, and started building his future with his own hard work. Watching him take responsibility made me believe people really can grow when they accept the truth. The biggest change, however, happened in my son. One evening, as we sat together after dinner, Neo looked around the house and smiled. He no longer asked whether he belonged there. The fear I had seen in his eyes after Christmas was gone. He finally understood that a person's value is not decided by angry words or unfair treatment. Looking at my son, I realized this story had never truly been about owning a house. It was about protecting the people you love while also protecting your own dignity. I wanted Neo to grow up knowing that kindness is a beautiful strength, but kindness should never mean accepting disrespect. You can forgive people. You can help your family. You can choose peace over revenge. But you should never forget your own worth, even when the people closest to you forget it. The strongest families aren't built by the person whose name is on the deed. They're built by the people who remember who carried them when everything was falling apart. Sometimes the greatest inheritance you can give your child isn't property. It's the courage to know your worth, even when the people closest to you forget it. Speech balloon. If you were Nality, would you have revealed the truth immediately, or waited until your family discovered it themselves?